The fingers pointing to where the white paint is on the sidewalk, where they were supposed to load the body. This is Anne Hesh, Ellen DeGeneres' ex-girlfriend. Her first girlfriend coming to Hollywood died in a car accident, and her new wife is named Porche, so she has a propensity for killing women who are named after cars or in car accidents.
Where did you share your first kiss?
Oh, this is very easy.
In the back of a limo. Very nice.
Yeah. Hey, you know what?
What?
You know how sometimes we play games with a lot of the guests on the show?
Sure, yeah.
We could play a game. All right, go.
New developments into that car crash in Los Angeles, and as the driver by TMZ and Fox 11 out there in Los Angeles identified as Anne Heche. Let's take a look one more time at that video that we saw earlier this afternoon of a car going into a house taking place there out in Mar Vista.
House of Preston, and car slam.
As we can see the helicopter video there of the car in the house, you can see firefighters on the scene there taking that car out from the house. Fox 11 in Los Angeles said the driver went into that house and sparked a fire. Firefighters were on the scene just before 11 a.m. on the West Coast. A car, a Mini Cooper, you can see there, went through the house, causing a massive fire. Within an hour, the firefighters, LAFD, had eventually pulled the car out of your home. You can see it was towed out of the home there. Firefighters still looking in the car to find possible survivors. The driver was rescued, as you'll see in this next little clip we're going to transition to real quick. They were taken to the hospital, as you can see there, in a hurry to get out of that car that crashed into that home. They were worried about the structural damage of that home as it was built in the 1950s, and you could see the house give way a little bit there in the house. So they were concerned about that, and also concerned about the person, the driver, who was identified as Anne Heche. You probably know the name from TV and movies, from 6 Days, 7 Nights, Donnie Brasco, Wag the Dog, Volcano, a bunch of movies. And there is a dramatic moment there just before being put into the ambulance to take to the hospital. That driver was identified as Anne Heche. You can see we slowed it down a little bit for you as firefighters were trying to help this woman get the help that she needed from the hospital as she crashed into this house, and the fire, like you heard just me say a little bit ago, they were trying to put that out. Of course, we are still trying to track down some details on how that happened and why it happened, and an update on Anne Heche as well. But the details right now are that driver.
As I mentioned before, some of the most devastating things that happen to you will teach you the most. The way I ended up on this path was from a very tragic event. When I finished school, I was completely lost. I had no ambition. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I did everything from I shucked oysters, I was a hostess, I was a bartender, I was a waitress, I painted houses, I sold vacuum cleaners. I had no idea. My girlfriend had been killed in a car accident, and we were living together at the time. My brother's band was performing, and we had broken up. We had fought a lot. She was trying to get me to come back home. I acted like I couldn't hear her because the music was too loud. I was planning on moving back in. I just was trying to teach her a lesson, and I was staying with some friends. So I just acted like I couldn't hear, and I was being really dismissive of her. She had left before us, and as we were driving home, we saw a car, and it was split in two, and we heard sirens behind us, so it had just happened. Nobody was there yet, and we just kept going. And I found out shortly after that it was her. And I was living in a basement apartment. I had no money. I had no heat, no air. I had a mattress on the floor, and the apartment was infested with fleas. And I was soul searching. I was like, why is she suddenly gone and there are fleas here? I started this path of stand-up, and it was successful, and it was great, but it was hard because I was trying to please everybody, and I had this secret that I was keeping, that I was gay, and I thought if people found out, they wouldn't like me, they wouldn't laugh at me. So
at the time you told your dad, he was with, you know, his new wife, right? And your stepmother. And what happened?
Well, actually, he told me that he figured it out. I was upset about something, and he kept saying, "Did you rob a bank? Did you kill somebody? Did you?" And I kept saying, "You know, no, I just don't want to tell you." And finally, I told him, and he told me. And then they asked me to move out of the house. And so
Because?
She had 2 little girls that they worried that it would influence them. And you know, everything was fine. It was just they didn't want me living in the house with the 2 little girls, which really hurt because I loved them, you know.
I finally decided that I was living with so much shame and so much fear that I just couldn't live that way anymore. And I decided to come out and make it creative, and my character would come out at the same time. And it wasn't to make a political statement. It wasn't to do anything other than to free myself up from this heaviness that I was carrying around. And I just wanted to be honest. And I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I can lose my career. I did. I lost my career. I got, the show was canceled after 6 years without even telling me. I read it in the paper. The phone didn't ring for 3 years. I had no offers. Nobody wanted to touch me at all. And yet I was getting letters from kids that almost committed suicide but didn't because of what I did. And I realized that I had a purpose, and it wasn't just about me, and it wasn't about celebrity, but I felt like I was being punished, and it was a bad time. I was angry, I was sad, and then I was offered a talk show. And the people that offered me the talk show tried to sell it, and most stations didn't want to pick it up. Most people didn't want to buy it because they thought nobody would watch me. And really, when I look back on it, I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, it was so important for me to lose everything because I found out what the most important thing is to be true to yourself. And ultimately, that's what's gotten me to this place. I don't live in fear. I'm free. I have no secrets. And I know I'll always be okay because no matter what, I know who I am. For me, the most important thing in your life is to live your life with integrity and not to give in to peer pressure to try to be something that you're not. To live your life as an honest and compassionate person, to contribute in some way.
New details are emerging about Anne Heche's morning before that fiery car crash left her in critical condition with severe burns.
Or I see she was in a crash, and I'm just like floored, like, oh my gosh, I'm praying, like, I hope she's okay, I hope she's okay.
Richard Glass owns Glass Hair Design in Venice Beach, and less than an hour before Anne crashed her car into a nearby house, she popped into his shop to buy a wig.
I discovered that it was Anne Heche, and from there she asked if she could purchase a red wig that was up top, and I said sure. And as I bring it down, I tell her that it's not cut or styled. She said she didn't care, she wanted it anyway. So from there, I bring it down, I tell her it's a little bit dusty. She says, no worry, just sell me some shampoo and conditioner. It was just so random, so random.
Right now, the LAPD is investigating Anne for misdemeanor DUI and hit and run. They're looking into what role drugs or alcohol may have played in the collision. But Richard says he didn't notice anything out of the ordinary about Anne during their encounter.
She wasn't speaking in cursive. You know, I say that, you know, if people are impaired, you know, they speak in cursive because it's like you're slurring your words. But she wasn't. She was very, very cordial, very personable, very polite. And yeah, like the whole encounter was maybe 10 minutes. So it wasn't huge, but it was strange all the same and random.
The visit also seemed pretty pleasant. Check out this selfie Richard snapped with the actress and her new hair.
There was just a coupling of my face. She told me how beautiful I was and had we worked together. And I said, no, we hadn't, but I'm available for you if you let me know. Sure. I took a photo with her, and from there, she left and, you know, went about her day.
It was about 20 minutes later that Anne crashed. Richard found out about the accident through social media, just after posting that photo.
I hear my alert go off, and from there, I hear or I see she was in a crash, and I'm just like floored, like, oh my gosh, I'm praying, like, I hope she's okay, I hope she's okay. I was just floored, you know. and just praying for her safety, you know, and everyone involved.
On Monday, Ann's rep told ET she's in a coma and has not regained consciousness since shortly after the accident. At this time, Ann is in extremely critical condition. She has a significant pulmonary injury requiring mechanical ventilation and burns that require surgical intervention. ET has learned that Ann has since been moved to a burn center in West Hills.
The only message that I have for Ann is her speedy recovery and just floored. Floored is her speedy recovery and healthy heart and healthy mind.
Bobby and Marla, it was amazing what happened out here. LA City Fire Department, I got to give it to them right off the bat. The men and women from this fire department, some of the most amazing. Vehicle into a structure, then that car catches fire. And when we say into a structure, I mean all the way in, almost coming out the other side. This house out here on Walgrove, right at the cross of Brookhaven, at Preston, you can see that T intersection. The best we can figure, that vehicle was on this street and made its way across, not stopping ever, through those hedges, through the front door, or through that front wall of this home, and lodged itself almost in the back. Then it caught fire. LA City Fire Department arriving here very quickly. They had this home with fire and knowing there is a vehicle inside there. Firefighters making an attack on that fire. Other firefighters trying to get into that building to get that driver out of that car. While all this was going on, they couldn't get to that car. They actually had to call in heavy rescue. That's what you see right there. They hooked up cables to that car, pulled it out. It's actually in that driveway. And then the driver, well, LA City Fire Department, their paramedics pulled that driver from that vehicle. We have tape of that, and then basically had him on a gurney. We weren't sure what the situation was there on his condition, but then as he made his way over to the ambulance, you see it right there, he jumps up out of that gurney. It was horrific, scary for a moment for everybody watching. And then the fire department, well, they had to sedate him and take him to the hospital. Right now, though, the structure still standing. No other victims inside that home. But again, this happening out here in Palms this afternoon. Crazy thing to see for sure. But again, that no other injuries, and that driver now in the hospital. I'm Stu up in Skyfox. Back to you guys in the studio.
Information about the car crash and the fire that led to the death of Ann Heche. Fire department records now show it took at least 45 minutes to get her out of a burning house in Mar Vista. And a lot of time passed before the rescue effort actually began. Our investigative reporter, Eric Leonard, joins us live from the newsroom with more on that. Eric?
Hi, Colleen. Well, we've been able to put together a very detailed timeline, a minute-by-minute account of what happened from the LA Fire Department's radio traffic and records. And all of it shows that as soon as firefighters arrived at the scene of that crash last month, they were told someone might be trapped in a car inside the burning home. It took at least 20 minutes to find that person, who we now know was Ann Heche.
There is a person stuck inside the vehicle.
The first firefighters to reach the home on Walgrove Avenue August 5th immediately began to attack the fire, as you can hear in these time-stamped recordings we obtained under the California Public Records Act.
I see some roof. Got one hole open, heavy smoke coming out.
Yet for the next 20 minutes, according to the recordings of the radio traffic that captured all the frequencies firefighters were using, none of the firefighters at the scene were specifically directed to get to the car or to try to make a rescue of the person inside, who we now know was Heche. At 11:18 a.m., one firefighter even reports that there was no one trapped inside.
We do have no patients at this time.
Then, at 11:22 a.m., in what the fire department says was the chaos and confusion of fighting the fire, one of the incident commanders asks again about whether or not there could be a person trapped inside.
Let me clear this up. So you do have a patient in the car.
3 minutes later, now at 11:25 a.m., a firefighter gets close enough to the car to confirm.
We have identified one patient. He's uninstructed, so if this time he switched up against under the floorboard.
By now, about 24 minutes had elapsed since firefighters arrived. All this time, Ann Heche was trapped inside her Mini Cooper, surrounded by smoke and fire. LA City Fire Deputy Chief Richard Fields, who supervises all of West LA, says firefighters had to confront multiple problems and hazards before they could get to the car.
Given the heavy fire and smoke conditions, It wasn't that you could clearly see into the vehicle or clearly be able to access it.
And he says the only view of the crashed car was from behind.
I will say that where the person was in the vehicle was not in the driver's seat, but on the floorboard of the passenger seat.
He says that made her more difficult to see. After Haish was spotted, 24 minutes after firefighters first arrived, the timeline shows it took another 20 minutes to get heavy equipment in place to pull the car out of the house and get Haish to an ambulance.
One patient in the auto, CSS, and about to get transported, loaded up on the gurney and rescue for transport.
Haish died a week later, and we now know from her death certificate that the cause of her death was listed as inhalation and thermal injuries. Handwritten notes from the fire department's on-scene commander don't make mention of the delay in starting the rescue, only that firefighters first engaged in offensive attack to knock down fire, then transitioned into physical rescue. Deputy Chief Field says it appears there was some confusion in the first minutes of the incident about that person dispatchers said was trapped inside. He says paramedics found and treated a woman, but she turned out to be the person who lived there.
You're right. The patient that was identified initially was the person that was in the home.
He says the firefighters at the scene worked as quickly as possible, and even if they'd known for certain someone was in the wrecked car, it probably would not have changed what happened.
They are very aggressive, almost to a fault. And in this situation, our firefighters were doing everything.
Now, we also got to look at the fire department's after-action report, and it says it took a half an hour at the scene that day to fight the fire to a point where a rescue could happen. The coroner's full investigation has not been completed. The coroner's office says it still can't be more specific about what led to Ann Haish's death. Reporting live in the newsroom, I'm investigative reporter Eric Leonard, NBC4 News. Back to you.